and I'm the founder of Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group. And I also have a coaching community called Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System. So self-discovery is where we can get underneath the problems. So when you're coming into this talk today on sugar, you might be thinking that I'm going to tell you basically everything you know about sugar. Sugar is bad for you. You shouldn't eat it. It's causes, chemical reactions in your brain. It's as powerful as, any drugs or whatever. And, you might be thinking that I'm going to talk to you about like how to eat more protein and like why, your body needs carbohydrates, but it doesn't need the empty calories of sugar and blah, 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 all of the stuff. So not what I'm going to talk to you about today. What I would like to talk to you about is to understand what's underneath the problem with sugar. Like, why are you so, rah when people start to talk about sugar and then you're like, oh, me, oh, I'm addicted to sugar too. Yeah, totally. No, I get it. Why is it that excites you alone? Why does that light you up? I swear, if I did a post that said something about like, how so-and-so like doesn't eat sugar anymore, but didn't make it like sexy, like didn't make it like about like these are the steps that you need to take, right? You'd probably be like, oh, nice for her. I make a post about somebody who is like struggling and like addicted to sugar and can't get off it, and everybody's like, me too, I got it, I know, I get it, like I feel that same way. And so we have this like powerful connection with feeling like sugar is the big problem. And yet really all it is the big elephant in the room. Like it's the one thing that we talk about so that we don't have to talk about the actual real problem. And I know that you know what I'm talking about. I know, I believe wholeheartedly that when you think that sugar is your problem, and if you could just lick that sugar habit, like you'd be okay. I know that you know that that's not actually true. And that's why I'm willing to bring this topic into the light, because underneath that sugar addiction, there's shame. You know that. There's a feeling that's underneath that you don't like about yourself. And Brene Brown, who I happen to read a lot, she says that shame it cannot live in the light. So we have to be able to bring this topic up, and we have to be able to get out of, and I called it like, help, I'm stuck in Sugarland, because we tend to think that this like sugar topic is the almost like glamorous, thing that's the best thing that we can talk about how we're stuck and how we can't get off sugar. And it almost feels like we're on a ride. And we'll talk about it like that, like talk to your girlfriends about, how you can't put the cookies down, or how things are calling your name, or, and then we talk about that weird anomaly, that weird friend who's like, I don't know what's wrong with her. She doesn't eat any sugar. She's weird, and we like to connect in this way. We actually like to feel like we're all sort of on the same difficult path together. Now, I completely get it, because that's how I lived my life. I really thought that everybody had the same thinking patterns that I did about sugar. And that's not true. It was just what I was telling myself, because the more that I didn't talk about the big elephant in the room, the bigger the elephant got, but the less I wanted to pay attention. And so if I just kept my sights set on the distraction that, sugar was the problem, well, then I wouldn't actually have to ever do anything about it. So I want you to write down on a piece of paper, what is it that is your problem with sugar? Like, what's the difference to you? What is it to you? Like, why would you ever want to stop eating it? Like, what's the problem with it? And write down, things that you feel, and you can write a list of 20 things, but really try and think outside the box. Because if you're like, oh, sugar makes me gain weight, and, sugar makes me anxious, and sugar makes me feel like a high and a low, or sugar is not good for my blood sugar, I'm a diabetic and I really shouldn't be eating sugar. I want you to think a little bit more outside the box than that. I want you to think about the relationship that you feel that you have with sugar. And because if there is a relationship that you feel like you have with sugar, meaning that that sugar allows you to feel connected with yourself in some way, that as soon as you take that bite, that you're like, oh yeah, like here, I'm with me, right? And even if that's the sad you, the lonely you, the scared you, the angry you, the disappointed you, the shameful you, even if that's the person that you get to meet there, you're still using that sugar to get to that version of you, really. And so I don't want you to talk to me about your health or your blood sugar or your anxiety or any of that stuff or your depression. I don't, let's push that away for the moment, right? We'll put a pin in it, right? We're not getting rid of it. We're just going to put a pin in it. Let's just talk about the actual elephant in the room. And let's decide together what that means to you. Like when you're in Sugarland, when you're the, like sugar is your best friend kind of thing, what is it that it connects you to yourself? What version of you gets to connect in there? Now, for some, I know for me, like one of my first like thoughts of sugar was this little poem that I remembered from a kid. It was like, I realized, girls and boys, right? And in my mind, when I was a little girl in the 70s, it was like sugar and spice and everything nice. That's what little girls are made of. Boys are made of snakes and snails and puppy dog tails. And right there, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm happy that I'm sugar and spice because that felt nice to me, right? And so that created a vision in my head of what sugar meant, that sugar was nice, like a girl, and sweet and pretty and delicate and dainty. And, that painted a picture in my mind. And so it's interesting because sugar has been glamorized, right? We see packaged ingredients constantly. There is commercials that, show products that use sugar, and they make it seem sexy and glamorous and exciting and wow and pop and, awesome. And, and it's colorful and it's beautiful in some ways. Have you ever watched commercials where they show a girl like eating a little chocolate thing and it's this beautiful thing, it's dripping, and you're like, wow, it lights you up from the inside out. And so this is the part where it's really important to be able to see what's underneath that desire to feel that connection that on the outside surface seems so exciting. It's like, yeah, sugar, woo! But then on the inside turns into like almost like a cider, like almost like sour, it like rots on the inside out. Now, I'm not talking about digestively speaking. It's just that when does it change? Like, when does it change from enjoying a sweet thing to being bitter inside of us, to poisoning our system, to being harmful and hurtful to who we are, what we feel connected with? Why does something that feels like it connects us to ourself initially, and it feels so connected with others, it feels like it allows us to connect to others, why does that turn sour inside of us, where then all of a sudden it actually isolates us and it has us feeling very alone, very scared, very restricted, very sad? Why does it do that? And so I want to introduce you to a concept that is called primary food versus secondary food. Now, this is something that I learned in the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. The head founder of the community there, Joshua Rosenthal, he coined this little concept on primary foods and secondary foods. And I teach this in Crush That Food Thing Self-Discovery System. And it's interesting because the nutritional plate, right, of the government, they have like carbohydrates, proteins, fats, oils, they vegetables, whatever. And they have like a nutritional plate. So envision like the actual food pyramid type thing. And what Joshua Rosenthal and integrative nutrition designed was he designed his own plate. And it was split in the middle. It had carbohydrates on one side, proteins on the other. It also included, your fruits and vegetables. So there you have it. It also included fats and oils and water, which is not surprisingly on the initial government plate for some reason. And that's on the inside, right? That was all your actual nutrients that you would need to survive as a human being. Okay, so picture this circle. This is your plate. You got all your stuff inside. What he did was he drew a larger plate on the outside of that circle, right? So here's your nutritional stuff. And on the outside was what he called primary foods. So the primary foods were the larger plate. And inside of that plate were your secondary foods, which is the food that you put into your mouth. And so it's interesting because what he coined, what he felt, and I agree with him, is that your primary foods have to come first. And if your primary foods are satisfied, then your secondary foods will become secondary. And so primary foods are your joy, your relationships, your purpose, your energy, your connection, your belonging, and your ability to be able to connect with yourself on a deeper level. Because if you're using sugar to connect with yourself somewhere on a deeper level, even if it's not the depth of the, spiritual side that you want, even if it's that lonely, sad, difficult, disconnected girl, you're still connecting with her, whatever it is. But if that primary food plate is lacking, if you're lacking in connection with yourself, or in joy, or in happiness, or in belonging, well, then, yeah, you're going to be empty on your primary plate, and you're going to need to fill your secondary food plate up really good. So let's talk about that word that I just said, the word need. I want you to think also about what I just talked about with sugar and the nostalgia that came around with it, right? It was like sugar and spice and everything nice. That's what little girls are made of. It's Willy Wonka. It's Candyland. It's, trips to Disney World. It's exciting. It's fun. It's glamorous. It's like, it's magical, really. It's magical. And it does light us up from the inside out. And we're allowed to keep that, that feeling inside of us. And the word that I just used, which is the word need, as we teach in Crush That Food Thing, it's a child's word. And it makes you feel like you need sugar. You need it, right? Because it's something that you've always had. You've always been a sugar addict. You've always had this, like your parents, when they went out and you were with the babysitter, they would get you a baggie of goodies to eat while you watched movies so you didn't cry, right? Or, who knows? It's really your story, right? And there is a story around it. If you're telling yourself that, you're in Sugarland and that you're just addicted and whatever, and kind of marching off aimlessly, like not paying attention to the elephant in the room, then sadly, you're using that to distract you from ever addressing the root cause of the problem. And so what I would like you to do is I would like you to change that and take away that word need, because you don't need sugar. And I'd like you to switch that word. Let me just back up. You don't need empty caloric sugar, right? You need carbohydrates. Yes, that you do. Your body needs that. But there's a huge difference between needing carbohydrates that have fiber in them versus needing to have, a million Hershey bars, right? That, like, it's so different. It's ridiculous, like not even close, right? And that, the logical side, like you get it, that when you're binging on sugar, that it's lethal doses, lethal, like within the words, right? And so the fact that you're making a decision and saying that you need to eat lethal doses of sugar, that's a nostalgia, that's a child's word. So if you can change that word to want and say like, I want lethal doses of sugar, you're going to be like, what? I do not want that. I don't want that, Lisa. So if you can switch those words around, it might rattle the distraction of telling yourself that you need this when clearly it's not what you want. And so this is kind of the first step towards breaking the trance that you are caught in Sugarland, la, 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 and being able to really step into the truth. And yes, the elephant in the room is part of the truth, and that's okay, right? We'll get to that. We'll come back around to it. But at the same time, if we never address it to begin with, then it's just going to be used as a big old elephant in the room, and it's not nice, right? So the things that we have to be able to do with this is we have to be able to break that spell. So we have to change the story. And I want you to start to address that within yourself. When do you tell yourself like, ooh, sugar, yay? Like, what do you do that causes you to create a fanciful story about how you're just a sugar addict and you can't change this, and this is how it was, you were brought up this way, it's genetics, your parents have a sugar addiction too, and you got this way because your grandma used to cook. And I mean, literally sound the alarms, like just stop. Stop. Because if you can stop the internal chatter around the fact that you are stuck in this situation, nothing you can do about it, if you stop the internal chatter about that, you'll actually be able to have a little room for personal growth. Because what ends up happening is an addiction to this, whatever, and the first place it's addicted really is in your mind, right? What ends up happening is that you end up struggling to achieve the vision of what your future self could ever be, because you basically tell yourself stories that you don't really believe. So it's like if you tell yourself that you would like to be able to give up sugar or whatever, and you make these unrealistic expectations for yourself while at the same time telling yourself that you're a sugar addict, well, what do you expect to happen? You can't tell yourself one thing and then decide you want to do another. It just doesn't work that way. So we want to be able to reel you in and bring you to the one thing that I truly think is the most important lesson in this whole process. And it's the one thing that we focus on in Crush That Food Thing. The one thing is your integrity. And we decide together what that means to you. And we help you to be able to see where it is that you are betraying yourself by telling yourself these things that are absolutely not true. Because if you continue to distract yourself with thoughts that are rolling around in your head that are not true. Now, I get it. You might be addicted to sugar. That's fine. That's physical, right? But if you keep telling yourself that you are, then you will believe yourself. You have no choice but to believe yourself until you tell yourself to stop. And so being able to break this spell, this like, I'm in Sugarland spell, is really going to be the first step to being able to get the help that you deserve. And so I know that sometimes, I just want to make certain that I didn't forget anything. I know that sometimes it can absolutely be terrifying to think about this. But when we're thinking about it on a huge scale, right? Because sometimes I'll talk to gals and they'll say to me like, well, I don't even know if I want to give this up, because how am I gonna, like, it's the only thing they can think of when you're feeling like you're disconnected from yourself. That sugar is the only thing that brings you back, right? but it's not true. Again, it's the elephant in the room. So, and yeah, and the greater your reluctance to see the fear, the more power you allow it. So think about it. Why are you afraid to address this elephant in the room? What is that about? What do you think's going to happen? Why do you hold yourself back? Why do you keep telling yourself a nostalgic, fanciful story about how you're an addict or how you're just, you're stuck and how you're just addicted to sugar and you can't do this and you can't change that and blah, 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 blah. Why? Why are you doing that? So if you want to talk about it a little bit, that's what we do here in our program, or you can DM me, you can PM me, you can Google me, you can email me, and we can chat about it. And so let's get you the help that you deserve. Let's get you out of Sugarland and into reality. All right. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye now.